Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Collab SpacetoCo's free monthly online sessions designed to assist those working in community venues to learn, upskill, and be inspired to do their work more effectively and efficiently. We hope you find these sessions useful for the important work you do in our local communities. For those of you who are watching this recording after this live event, hello, and we hope that you get valuable knowledge from this session. My name is Carmela, and I organize these monthly learning series. And just a little bit about SpacetoCo before we move on. Our mission in SpacetoCo is to help community venues be a thriving hub in their communities. We do so by providing opportunities to be able to grow bookings, increase community engagement, as well as support. We also create and provide free resources for those working in community venues. SpacetoCo is a two-sided marketplace where you can list your spaces where guests can find and book them online. It is also an efficient booking system tool where you can reduce your admin by 80%. We work with a number of local governments as well as community centers across Australia and New Zealand. Today's session is how to handle difficult conversations. Handling difficult conversations is one of those key skills that you need as a leader and manager of a venue, team, or project. Knowing how to prepare for, structure, and have them increases the chances of them having positive outcomes. In this session, our speaker Tash, a certified people leadership coach, will share a simple structure in having courageous conversations to help you feel more confident with those tools to deal with issues before they become bigger problems. And our awesome speaker today, we are so lucky, guys. We've honestly got the expert Tash. So, Tash is a certified people leadership coach who helps managers become leaders people actually want to follow. Her mission is to kick out mediocre management and develop legendary leaders. With over 13 plus years in HR and 5 plus years running her own coaching practice, Tash has had a first-hand experience of what is needed for leadership to be impactful. She is also a wife and a mother, so she brings it in her coaching work the lived experience of living a full life, creating a successful career, running a business, and practicing self care with solid boundaries to ensure that she shows up as the best leader she can be across every area of her life. So, without further ado, we welcome Atash. Let me pop her on the stage. Here we go. Let me pop. Where's Tash? Here you go.
Hello, hello.
No, I give the floor to you.
Okay, hello everyone. It's so nice to connect with you all. I can't see any of you, so I'm speaking into the ether and hoping that you receive all my words. I'm excited to run the session for you, and I hope that you take away everything that you need from it. So let's jump on in. Just make sure this is going. All right, so you're in the right place if you want to have better conversations with people, influence buy-in to get people to take action, deal with things early before they become bigger problems, and create better outcomes through conversations. Now, I will be talking a little bit about influencing as well as navigating difficult conversations, because with some of the insights that Carms has shared with me about some of the challenges that come up for you as venue owners or managers and leaders, influencing is definitely a key part of that. So, as Carms already did a bit of an introduction, this is me, so I'm not going to go through this again. But today we're going to cover the 4 aspects of influence. So I think it's really important to understand how to influence better, especially with some of the comments around, how to get people to buy in, maybe needing to have conversations about increasing hire fees. I know that one of the key challenges is also sometimes shifting clients to moving to the online system where that maybe not something that they're comfortable with or don't want to do, or maybe don't see the necessity in it. So how we can influence them to take action and create change is really beneficial. And then also the steps on how to have productive, difficult conversations, because there is a bit of a structure to how you can prepare to increase the success that you can have from those conversations. And then at the end, we'll have some time for coaching and questions that you have. But throughout the session, there are some reflection points that I'll just pause and do some reflection. So please feel free to use the chat box to reply to any of those. I love reading them. I can see it on the side of my screen there. So feel free to pop anything in the chat as we go. So let's dive in to make the most of the time. So influencing is the capacity to have an effect on the character development or behavior of someone or something, right? So we want something to change. We want something to be different. And so we want to be able to leverage our influencing skills to be able to do that. And influencing is about the intention, the impact, the benefit, and the connection that we have to the person and to the thing that we're needing them to do. So it's really about understanding and diving deeper than just, I'm asking you to do this, but really wanting to go that layer deeper where how can I understand them more? How can I leverage what I know about them to be able to get them to take action, to be able to get them to do what I would like them to do? But ultimately, influencing comes from good relationships, right? So which take effort and take time for us to nurture those relationships and build them, because without a relationship, asking people to do something for you feels a little bit tougher, and it can be a little bit tougher. So when we can take the time to understand our team, our project team members, our customers, our clients, we have the ability to be able to influence them a bit better. But also, influencing is not only falling onto or only utilizing your content or your expertise, like, oh, this is the data, or, you know, this is the benefits. It's about how you connect to people. So knowing a bit more about them than the surface level outcomes that you're wanting to get, or maybe the more efficient you want life to be for them, but kind of going deeper and going, how can I connect to this person more for them to be able to understand why I'm asking this thing, or help them to see the value in this thing. So if we can think about how we build our relationships, how we nurture our relationships to then have that in our back pocket for when we need to influence, that's going to get us really, really, what's going to increase the ability for us to get better results. So what are the 4 considerations when it comes to influencing someone? So there's the person, the impact, the benefit, and the connection. And I'm going to share how you can learn and how you can use each of these considerations, because by using each of these considerations and bringing them together, we are then building our ability to influence and get them to move, right, and get traction. So firstly, the person. What we want to know is, who are they? Why are they someone you need to connect with, right? Why are they important in this decision or change? How do they think? What are their preferences? How do they process information? How do they make decisions? What are their biggest challenges? Right now, what is taking up most of their time? What is creating the most roadblocks for them? What's top of mind? What's their biggest struggle? What's their biggest energy drain? If we know these things, we have the ability to leverage we have the ability to influence our outcome or our decision if we can play to this, right? If we can speak to this, because then they'll be like, oh, you are potentially going to solve this for me. I am interested in what you have to say. I want to see how this is going to benefit me. And then ultimately, what do they most want? What would make their life easier? What would make them happy? What would bring them energy? Right? When we know these things, we can then use that information to go, okay, well, how would I angle my proposal or my change or my decision to speak to these things? Because if they feel a connection to that, they're going to be more likely to see the value in it. So for example, transitioning one of your clients to using the online booking system. There might be people that are like, I don't want to, I know the current system works for me, but you know that this would be a lot more efficient. It'll make bookings happen more smoothly. There will be less interruptions, things are more automated. You see the value in this, but we need to understand what are their biggest challenges right now? What are their key desires? What do they most want to make this more appealing for them? Because that's then how we can have them buy into what it is that we want. This then also helps for when we need to get into difficult conversations where we might be having some resistance to things that we need, or, people just are not, engaging or not wanting to participate. That's, having our ability to influence, having this information will then make those conversations a lot easier. Then we have the impact. So if we didn't do this thing, if our customers or our clients or our team members didn't do this, they didn't take action, what would happen, right? What impact does the current way that we're doing things have? Like, if nothing changes, if we don't move forward, if we don't make this change, if we don't implement this thing, what would happen? What would be the impact of that? How can we articulate that in a way that makes them really see the value of that impact? What are the short-term or the long-term impacts of this? Like, if we don't do anything now, what will happen now, or what will happen in the long term? We want to make that really clear so that people can see that and understand it. Why does it need to change? Why now? And if we do change it, for what? What are the benefits? What do we get out of it? Right? And then what's the evidence we have to back up this claim? So if this is the impact that we're having, what is the evidence that we can show or share to them to make them really see that and understand it, to get them to see the value and why we need to create this change? And so your evidence might be, data, but then you might need to shift that data and go, okay, well, how can I communicate this data for people who are more story orientated, for people who like, more storytelling and understanding, the full story of it? And then what are the people that just want the data? So we really want to look at how are we presenting information for people to take it in and help their decision-making process to then get what we need from it. Then we have the benefit. So the impact is, the consequence, like the cost, but what's the benefit? What are we going to get? So why is what you want them to do needed? Right? So it flips the impact over to appeal to the desires. So remember, you took some time to understand what do people most want. This is where you're speaking to that. If we do this thing, it will enable this. It will give us more of this. Right? We're speaking to the benefits. We're speaking into the desires of what makes people's lives easier. How would this benefit them? What does this give them? Right? We want the good things. What's the short-term and long-term win? So if we make this change, if we implement this thing, what will they get in the short term? And then what will they get in the long term? The clearer we can make this, the more willing people are to lean into it, right? The more willing people are to go, okay, I'll do that, because they can see what's in it for them. And ultimately, people are centered on that, right? What does this mean for me and what's in it for me? Those are the two questions we ultimately want answered when change happens. And then lastly, what results or targets will this help create and reach? So if this is an internal change, for your team members, what results or targets will this enable them to get, right? How will this help them achieve more? For your clients and customers, like what would this help with for them? How would this, maybe if it's an efficiency, how much more efficient will this make for them? How will this make, maybe you're reducing 5 clicks to 1 click. How would this really help them, right? We want to be able to showcase the benefit so clearly that people are like, oh my gosh, I want that. Maybe I don't necessarily want to go through the change. Maybe I'm uncomfortable with the change, but you are selling the benefit to me so clearly that I want to go through that discomfort, right? I want to go through that. So the benefit is another good one. Just to let you know, we are going to send the slides, so you don't have to take notes of every single slide, because I know that there's a lot on there. And then the fourth piece is the connection. So this is where you're tying in the person, the benefit, and the impact together. And this is where we're thinking about the person or the group very specifically. What's in it for them? So you've taken the time to understand the person or the group and tie it right back to them, tie the benefits and the impacts so clearly to them that they can see how this addresses their challenges, how they can see how this gives them their desires, or maybe not even their whole desires, but just gives them a little bit more, right? Gives them closer to that, and make it as tangible as possible where possible. The more tangible we can create these benefits and these impacts, the more people are going to see the value in them. And we also need to really articulate, why should they consider this? Why should they consider this change or this decision? And this is where you use your information and data to make that consideration compelling, right? You want them to buy into it. You want them to see the value in it. So tell the story that helps take them on that journey, that helps to get them to see that. And link the benefits to their key desires. So you've got the benefits, you know what the benefits will do, you know how this will help people, But how can you link that directly to their desires? If they want more time, if they want, better access to venues, or if they want, their venue booking process to be smoother, or they, want a project to run smoother, how will this change enable that to happen? Right? Can we link our proposed change to their key desires? And one of the key points of when we are wanting to create any kind of change is we have to acknowledge change adjustment time. Whenever you are proposing anything that asks someone to do something different, whether it's to improve something, to change something, or to start something new, you need to account for time that it's going to take for them to adjust to that. Because we can't just flick a switch and go, this is the new process, and people are just going to be able to run with that straight away. There's going to be adjustment time for them to learn that process, learn those steps, and then for that to become the new process that they follow, that new natural, steps that they take. Because we are naturally habitual people, so we like doing things the way we like doing them, and we like doing things how we know to do them. And when we are prompted for that to change, there's discomfort there, and that will take time. So those are just the four, just like a really quick run through on the 4 considerations of how to influence. And you can use these considerations on literally any situation. Anytime you are wanting someone to change something, do something different, buy into something, get them to say yes, whatever it is, utilizing these 4 considerations will help you get a better outcome, or increase the chances of you getting a better outcome. So that's just a quick run through on influencing. Does anyone have any questions on that? If you do, let me know. But I just want you to just take a moment and just to think, which consideration do you want to focus on more to build your influencing skills? And which consideration do you already do well? And you can just pop it into the chat box, and we can reflect on it at the end. But now I'm going to dive straight into having a difficult conversation, because I know that is why you're all here. But I really wanted to offer that those influencing steps to just give you an extra strategy in your toolkit to use. So I did see a couple of questions in there. Great. Okay. So having a difficult conversation. First of all, start with why. I know this sounds simple, but so many people don't do this step. Why do you need to have this conversation? What's going on, and what impact is it having on you or the people around you that you need to have this conversation? And what will happen if you don't address it? Right? Difficult conversations can be a whole range of different things, right? Setting boundaries with someone, dealing with passive or, aggressive behavior, dealing with inappropriate behavior, dealing with poor performance, dealing with a difficult client or customer, needing to tell your manager that you're struggling with something. There's lots of different things that can be classified as a difficult conversation, but ultimately a difficult conversation predominantly is the conversation that you're avoiding having, right? The conversation that you don't want to have because you don't know how they're going to react. You don't know how it's going to go. You don't know what the outcome's going to be. And so we tend to avoid it. But one of the first things we always need to do before we think about having a courageous conversation is really understand why. Because sometimes we dive into difficult conversations when it doesn't actually warrant it. It's something that we actually need to work through and process ourselves. Maybe it's because, I actually need to change my perception of something, or maybe I need to change my own behavior that's then having this impact. But in a lot of cases, we do need to have these conversations. But we want to understand why. We need to understand the deep reason to why this conversation is important, because we need to be able to articulate that, right? Because if we can share why we're having this conversation and why it's important, we have a better chance of having a better conversation, right? So really sit with yourself and dig into this. And through this, reflection, you might uncover that this is a trivial issue, that, maybe you're just making a bigger deal, or it's actually a really valid issue that needs to be addressed. And the way that I recommend kind of thinking about this is a trivial point is, oh, it's because I wouldn't do it that way, or oh, I just personally didn't like that and I wouldn't have said that, or I wouldn't have done that. Well, in the scheme of things, is the way that they did it fine? Did it work? Did it get the outcome that we wanted, and doesn't, go against our values or, our the way that we present ourselves? That could potentially be a trivial thing. On the other side of that, where we might say, okay, it does warrant a difficult conversation, is if this happens again, it will cause another problem. Or if this continues to happen without being addressed, this can compound into a bigger problem. Those are usually the two biggest signs that a difficult conversation has to happen. And it's important that you're really clear on this, because it also helps you decide what kind of resolution are you looking for. So when you understand why this is important, you're also starting to think about, okay, well, what is it that I need to see in order for there to be resolution here? Whether it's, well, I need them to stop doing something, or I need them to, admit or apologize to something, or we need to come to a better understanding on something, or reset expectations, wanting to understand what are some of those resolutions that we're looking for. The second step is checking your ego. Now, oftentimes we don't do this piece, and this is a really important piece, because your ego has no place in difficult or courageous conversations. There is a difference between speaking up about something that needs to be addressed and talking down to someone. And if our ego is present, if it's taking up a lot of the space in the room, we are often not open to really listening. We are more interested in being right than trying to have a curious and productive conversation with this person. So we want to check our ego and make sure that we are keeping ourselves in check in this conversation. Because these conversations are not about I'm right and you're wrong. It's about talking about what is happening and the impact of it, to then come to a resolution together around what it looks like to move forward. We don't want to get into a push and pull with these conversations. And so sidestepping your ego is a really powerful way to ensure that, one, you don't avoid courageous conversations because you're not worried about being mean or rude. When we're caught up in our ego, we're more worried about what they're going to think of us than the importance of having the conversation. And so it's really important to think about having these conversations as an opportunity to work through something together, right? To come to a resolution together, not about proving or, talking down or, anything like that. We are wanting resolution in the best way that we can. Doesn't mean we're always going to get it. We can't always control that, but checking your ego is about really being intentional about the way that you're showing up and making sure that you are in a good space to be able to show up and have that conversation. And when we aren't honest with people about how we feel, we do a disservice to us and them, right? So when we avoid conversations, when we let our egos get in the way, we're not doing a service to our relationships, right? When we avoid these conversations and don't share what's actually going on, we're not providing an opportunity for us to grow and for change to happen and for meaningful connection to take place. So the third step is to have the facts clear. Now, this is a key one, because we want to make sure that what we're talking about and what we're addressing has basis, right? Because people love facts, they love examples, they love specifics. We don't love broad, vague statements, right? So really understand what you're wanting to talk about and be specific. Do you have specific examples that you are talking about in terms of issues that you're raising? People respond better to specifics, not generalizations like, you always do this, or you never say this, or you never do this. Like, we've all had instances where our partners have said that, and then you want to bite their heads off, right? And then it just full blows into a full argument, and then nothing happens, right? Nothing productive. So the more specific we can be, the more examples we can provide, the better chance that they have to actually give their side of the story, and they have the opportunity to respond thoughtfully to those examples rather than you always and you never. And be clear. What did you see? What did you hear? What do you know? What information did you get? What did you feel about it? Like, what specifically came up for you that's bringing this up, that's making you want to have this conversation? And what impact is it having? This is the key part. This is tying back to that influencing piece. If we can't articulate the impact, why should they care? Right? If we can't articulate what impact this issue is having, why would they care? Why would they see this as something that they need to think about, something that they need to change? So we need to be really clear about what that is. And share what's true for you, right? You're sharing your examples, your experiences. Be mindful of bringing other people into the conversation. You know, for example, Donna thinks so too, or the whole team thinks this, or, you know, I've heard this from 5 people. As soon as we say things like that, people are going to want to know what those things are. Remember, people want specifics. If we say the whole team feels this way, be like, the knee-jerk reaction will be like, well, who on the team? What did they say? You know, what examples do you have? Share the facts that you have, that you can share, that you can speak to. That is really, really important. Then step 4, once you've done step 1, 2, and 3, that's all very focused on you. That's your preparation time. Now we're stepping into the conversation. And this is where you share your side, you share your story. So invite them to have a conversation with you and then share your story clearly and openly, right? You want to share the facts, you want to share the impact, you want to share the examples so that they have the opportunity to respond to those things. And this is your perspective, right? This is your perspective and your experience. So share that with them so that they have the opportunity to respond. One extra thing that I will say here is that no matter what facts you have, it'll never be 100% of the facts. Because until you talk about it with them, until you share those facts with them and give them the opportunity to respond, you don't have the full story. Even if you have a complaint from a customer, or you've got, a complaint or an issue from a colleague, that's still just one side of the story. And so sharing your story and opening that conversation is providing the opportunity for them to give you more information, to give their side. And be aware not to attack someone, right? You are addressing the issue, you are addressing their behavior or their action or their inaction. You're not attacking them as a person, right? And this is one of the key things around difficult conversations. And this is where we want to prevent the you always and you never, because then it becomes, we're stepping into attacking territory. We're now starting to attack them as a whole person, whereas we want to stay focused on what is the action or inaction that we are talking about, the specific thing. The more focused we can be on that, the more productive that conversation can be. So here are some examples of how you can open this. Hey, Molly, on Tuesday you said XYZ, and I felt really hurt by this, right? The impact it's having. And then you go into the next step. Hey, Tom, I'm noticing that ABC has changed and you're not doing XYZ anymore. It's starting to have this impact. So, I'm noticing that you're starting to show up late for work more often than not. And that it's, causing us to start our meetings late. What's going on? Is there something happening that I need to be aware of? Right? We want to share the examples, the specifics, and the impact. And you can always, for more personal, courageous conversations, you can always use Brené Brown's line and, you said or did this thing, and the story I'm telling myself about it is. Because remember, this is just our story. This is our experience. We don't know the full extent of that yet. And then this is where we open up to their side. Once you share your side, you need to be quiet and shush and give them the opportunity to talk, right? That's what we're wanting to do with these difficult conversations. We're sharing our side and we're creating the space for them to share their side. And this is the key part, right? We need to allow them the time to share theirs. And I think that comes back to someone in the chat said, want to make sure that they feel really heard. Pauline, this is that part here, right? We need to be willing to really listen. We need to be willing to hear them out. If you're not willing to do that, don't have a difficult conversation. Don't open this conversation. If you are not willing to be quiet and listen and sit, you're not ready for that conversation. We make up our own stories about how we perceive them, about how we perceive things, and about what we think things mean, but we don't know the truth of that. We don't know the reality of that. And so we need to be open to their view of what's happened. We need to be open to us being completely wrong. We need to be open to there being things that we've never considered before. And it's important that this is done with full respect, right? And that you're genuinely open to hearing that side. And again, if you're not, go back to your why. If you're not, go and check your ego again. Because, one thing that I say to a lot of people around difficult conversations and courageous conversations is you've had a lot of time to prepare and think about this. They haven't, right? This might be the first time that they're hearing this. This might be the first time that they're processing this. So we need to give them that opportunity. And so you can say things like, I would really like to know why you said that, or has something changed that you'd like to talk about, or is there something that I've missed or misunderstood? Or, is there something going on that would be helpful for me to know? Being really open and curious is really important. You can even say, the assumption that I'm making is X, Y, Z, and I want to know if that's true. Or can you tell me if I have that wrong? Right? This is why ego doesn't have a place in these conversations, because sometimes we are wrong. Sometimes we have made assumptions that are completely incorrect, and we need to be okay with that and go, oh, wow, I didn't even think of that, or wow, I didn't even realize that that was even a thing, or I didn't even think that that's what you would say. And that's not a weakness. It's not a flaw. It's just part of being human, right? Part of being human and dealing with other humans. When we're asking for their story, we need to deeply listen. So there's a line that I came across from Oscar Trimboldi, and he's a listening coach. And he said that to deeply listen is to have the willingness to have your mind change. If you are not willing to have your mind changed, you're actually not open to listening to what people have to say. So if you are willing to have your mind changed, you're willing to be wrong, you're willing to, consider that things are completely different to what you might think, then you're ready to have that conversation. It means that you're curious. So are you open to that, right? You need to be ready to create that space for them. Because like I said before, you've had time to consider this and process this and, spiral and prepare and, talk about it with other people potentially. And in a lot of cases, they don't even know, right? I've been in HR a long time, and in a lot of cases, managers are like, oh, they're lazy in this, and they're terrible performers. And then they have these conversations with their team members, and the team members like, I didn't even realize this was an issue. We make a lot of assumptions, but often those assumptions are not correct. And so we need to be really willing to listen. And deeply listening, a really key part of that is being okay with silence. How comfortable are you to sit in silence? When you ask someone a question, how long are you okay to sit there before they answer? The average person can't go more than 3 seconds. But I would recommend building your tolerance for silence for up to 10 to 15 seconds. That means being okay to sit there for 15 seconds after asking a question before they answer. And for a lot of people, that's really uncomfortable. The reason that this is important is because not everyone processes in the same way and processes as quickly. Some people need more time to process what you've said. Some people want to take more time to think about what they are going to say before they say it. And so learning to be comfortable in that space is really, really important. So one way you can practice this is the next time someone asks you a question, just sit still for 5 seconds and see what happens. and build your tolerance with silence that way. When they're sharing their story, a key step to really think about is don't jump in with defensiveness and justification. So as they're sharing their side, don't jump in and interject and go, oh, but this, and oh, but that's not what I meant, or oh, I think you got it wrong. Like, just let them talk, let them share, and then once they've finished, then go back and go, okay, when you responded about, when you said this, I think there might have been a misunderstanding. This is actually what I meant. Again, creating that respectful space for people to share without jumping in and kind of defending and batting backwards and forwards will really help. And that's not to say that they might not be that way. Like when you share your story, they might jump in and want to defend and justify. Just ask and say, hey, look, I will give you a chance to talk. I just want to share my side. And then you'll have the opportunity to share, and I will also listen to that. Right? We can't control them, but we can control the way that we're showing up and the way that we're responding. And that will help to feed that conversation. And then lastly, we want to agree on a way forward. Now, I will put a caveat here that the agreeing on a way forward might not happen in the initial conversation. So sometimes your difficult conversations might completely derail and go off track. Like, I'm just going to be honest, sometimes that will happen. Best thing that you can do is acknowledge it and say, hey, I think we're going off track. I don't think that this is productive. Let's take a pause, and we're going to come back tomorrow at 3:00 and finish this conversation. We can both just take some time out and think about it. Because if you're both, if emotions are starting to kind of feed into the conversation and, kind of egos are starting to get in there, like no one's going to have a productive conversation. So you can always pause and say, look, I think we're going off track. Let's just take a pause and we can come back. But you have to come back and finish the conversation. You can't just say, oh, we're getting unproductive, let's pause, and then just never finish the conversation, because that's just not going to solve the problem. Right? So not every courageous conversation or difficult conversation is going to have this beautiful resolution with a tied up bow at the end. But we can do the best that we can, right, with what we have. So we can move towards that and go, say if it's an unproductive conversation, you can say, look, I think we're not getting anywhere. This is becoming unproductive. And I think we do need to agree on a way forward, but let's just take a pause and we'll come back and we'll talk tomorrow at 3:00. And then we'll, so just have a think about how you want to move forward from here. And then that gives that space for both of you to think, for there's some space to be had between that. And some people will just need that time to process and reflect. Maybe this is the first time that they're hearing it, and they just need to actually go away and think about it and then come back and be able to share their side. Sometimes people don't even have a side to share yet because they've just heard this for the first time. So again, we need to be a bit flexible and be open to that. And there'll always be desires from both sides, right? You've got your ideal, what do you want from this? How do you, what outcomes do you want? But then you also need to be willing to be flexible. So you can always propose your outcome of, how do you think we could move forward, if you just want to be open and just see what they have to say. Or if you want to propose your side, what would you think if we did X, Y, Z? Or, I had the idea that we could potentially do this. What are your thoughts? In some cases, there might be some non-negotiable changes of, look, this needs to happen in order for us to move forward. What would it take for that to happen? So sometimes we can't be flexible with that. Sometimes we just need to make a decision and go forward. But we still want to create the opportunity for us to have a discussion about it, so I can understand where you're coming from and you can understand where I'm coming from. And that's what we're really wanting out of difficult conversations, is the opportunity for us to share our side, to hear their side, and then use both of those things to move forward, right? To reestablish the expectations, to maybe shift some boundaries, whatever it might be, right? So I know that was a lot. I tried to do it really quickly. This is normally a 1 to 1.5 hour workshop on its own to go through each of these, but I will share these slides with you so that you can dig into it a bit more. And as always, you can always reach out to me and ask any questions. But I am conscious of time, and I know that there's some questions in the chat, so I will answer those for you now. But If you do want to get in touch, if you do want to find out more about me and my work, the details are on the slides as well. And I'm more than happy to answer any additional questions. But what I'll do is I will go into the question box now. I think you've put some.
Awesome. While you're having a look through, I just want to. I'm speechless.
I know it was so much. Sorry.
It was so good. Like the amount of notes that I've written has been so awesome because this doesn't just apply to those working in community venues. I'm sure it applies to personal and every kind of relationship we have. So while you're taking the time to look through the question box, I did Tash, FYI, I did put it in the Q
Yes.
tab
I
just
can see them there.
easier. So while you're sifting through that, I just wanted to share a few of the notes that really stood out to me. One of which is influencing comes from good relationships. It's important to nurture those relationships and take the time to connect and get to know them. Understanding why helps you be more discerning about the deeper reason and articulate it better, which helps it to have better outcomes. And be aware not to attack someone. You never have 100% of the facts. You do not have the full story, so be open to hearing the other side of the story. Honestly, that's just 3 out of like 15 notes that I've written. It's honestly such good and key strategies that you've given and quite practical as well. So I think if we go through some of the questions, I'll read out some of them. I think I'll go from the most recent ones. I think one of the main ones that stood out was with Peter. Like he did say, what are some keys to dealing with passive aggressive behavior?
Yeah, so I guess what a good follow-up, Peter, if you're still there and can pop it in as a response in the chat box, is are you asking about how to deal with passive aggressive behavior in general, like how to actually approach that to deal with it, or in terms of when you're in a conversation, like in a difficult conversation with someone and they're coming at you with passive and aggressive behavior? Yeah.
I think that's a good, you can talk about that too, because Anna Wong's question is something similar. Like, how do you get the other party to meet you with the same energy?
Okay. So we can't control, we can never control the behavior that someone is coming, both. Okay, Peter, great. We can never control the behavior that someone is bringing into a conversation with us. So what I would always say with someone who is, so passive and aggressive are actually two different types of like behavior responses, right? So we've got passive aggressive, which is kind of more upfront, being like, yeah, cool, but then behind your back talking about it or making snidey remarks or, kind of underhanded, which is a lot more subtle and, not as blatant in your face behavior. Whereas aggressive, obviously, they're coming at you. It's a lot more defensive. It's in your face. But what I would always recommend is point it out. Get your emotions under control, right? Don't do it in the heat of your emotions. So this is the checking the ego, regulating your emotional state. As leaders, this is one of the biggest skills that we need to practice of how do we regulate our emotions, to be able to deal with things like this. But I would always just point it and be like, hey, in this situation, I noticed that you had this behavior, or I noticed that you were showing this behavior. I want to understand where that came from, or I want to understand why you chose that behavior. Sometimes people they're not, I've had the cases where people aren't aware that that is what they're actually doing and that they're not aware of the impact that it has. And I know that we can be quick to make assumptions of, but they should know that that's not okay. And they should know that that's, that would, that would have that impact on me, or they should know that that's not, appropriate. But remember, or maybe this isn't even a remember, but be mindful that everyone has different conditionings. Everyone has different mindsets. Everyone has different methods of how they were raised, which creates different conditions of what's appropriate and what's normal. So people who grew up in a volatile home, who grew up in who had a lot of volatility, a lot of toxicity, a lot of, anger, a lot of dysregulation, are more prone to having behavior like that because that's a lot of what they experience and that's a lot of what was modeled. People who didn't have a lot of that, where their upbringing and a lot of their situations was very calm and very mature and very very respectful, won't behave that way and will be very sensitive to behavior that's not like that. So it's not to say that we ever have to condone it or say that it's okay or overlook it, but it's having a generous assumption of where is this coming from. Not assuming that they're out to get you or that they're trying to attack you, but going, what is going on for this person that this is the response? What might be happening that this is the reaction that they're choosing, or this is the behavior? And if we can bring that generous assumption and that curiosity to then ask, we absolutely pinpoint it. Hey, I noticed this. This is the impact that it had. What's going on? That curiosity makes such a big difference. If that continues, we're having very different conversations, right? Because behavior is part of performance. And if someone is expressing inappropriate behavior, poor behavior, they're actually not a high performer, right? And we want to be dealing with that as a particular issue. But yeah, that's what I would say, like pinpoint it, bring it up that it's not okay, and then understand where it might be coming from. Also, the other thing I would say is it consistent behavior or is it a one-off? If it's a one-off, what might be going on? Are they going through a divorce? Did something happen with their kids? And this is what I mean. We never have 100% of the story. We never know. And there is just something so powerful about bringing a generous assumption to situations, where we're just like, hey, I want to understand what's going on. It's not okay. And I'm not going to allow it, but I want to understand where it's coming from.
Amazing. Say less. There's so many questions. That's why we want to try and cover.
Yes, yeah.
You have already mentioned a lot of great strategies, but with Connie's, like the one she asked before, if you have any other advice further about good ways to navigate the balance between needing to tell people off and ensuring that the message is received.
Oh, okay. I would need more context. I mean, I would need to understand, like, what are we telling people off about? Let me just think about this. From a leadership perspective, I don't agree with telling people off. I think it's more about what are the expectations that have been set and where are the expectations not being met. So one of the most important things as leaders is setting really clear expectations, right? When our expectations are super clear and people understand what they need to do, why they need to do it, what's the time frame for doing it, not necessarily how they have to do it, because we don't have to go into micromanagement tendencies, but understanding what's expected of them, how we give that feedback becomes a lot easier. Right. So if we have a clear expectation that's been set, we then reference that. Be like, this is the expectation. This is what we agreed, or this was what was spoken about. Why wasn't that met? Or talk me through why we got to this point, or talk me through how we got this result. And people to really own their part in that saves the telling off piece. I think that we get into telling off when it's like, I'm trying to control the situation or I'm trying to be dominant of the situation, rather than going, this is what was expected or this is what we agreed. I need you to talk me through why that wasn't met, and having them really own that and then go, okay, this is what's expected now, either resetting that expectation or changing it. Right. Hopefully that's helpful, Connie. But we definitely want to move away from like, oh, I need to tell someone off, to what was the expectation and can I get curious about why the expectation wasn't met, to then reset it.
Yeah, that's good.
That will always help a little bit more.
Yeah. Anna had a question. How do you get the other party to meet you in the same energy? I had like a similar question about like how how do you deal with someone when how do you respond when you can tell the other person you're having a difficult conversation with is not receptive and going on the defensive rather than, and also like not listening, because when you're talking and you can already see. So like how do you respond to that, like in that moment when you're actually having the difficult conversation?
Yeah. So like, again, we can't control what people are going to do. We can't control the energy that they're going to have. This is where, like, if we know the person, can we use that, right? So if if this person doesn't like being caught off guard, don't just like spring the conversation on them, right? Say, hey, there's an important conversation that we need to have. It's about this. Do you want to have it now, or or when would be a good time to have it? Like, that can really help people rather than like being sprung on, because often the defensiveness can be from like, oh, this was so unexpected, like I just didn't see this coming at all. But again, sometimes you just can't control that either, right? Like, it's hard, right, when you're dealing with other people. But when you're in the moment and you're starting to see it, you're starting to see the shutdown, or you're starting to see that, or they're like trying to interject, or you can see like the body starting to pull up. This is where you take your breath. You say, hey, I know that this is uncomfortable for me as well. I just want to share my side, and then I'm going to listen to what you have to say. Like, our ability to stay composed is what's going to feed the defensiveness or reduce the defensiveness, right? So again, pinpoint it. Hey, I can see that you're trying to interject, or I can see that maybe you don't agree with what I'm saying. I'm just asking you to listen, and then I'll give you the chance to talk. They might not like it. They might go, oh, I think this is ridiculous. Like, look, this isn't about whether you agree or not. I'm taking the opportunity to share something. When I'm finished, you'll have the chance. And if you don't want to talk about it, we'll talk about that, or, we'll discuss that then. You will have some instances where people just don't want to engage in the conversation. That's where you need to think about the outcome that you wanted, right? So if we think about personal relationships, this is where sometimes this becomes more like emotively driven, like in our personal relationships with things like this. You just, again, like, what is important as an outcome here? In work dynamics, if you're a manager and a team member, you can't not have a resolution to this at some point, right? Like, we need to. So this is where, like, thinking about your outcome that you're looking for, what's a non-negotiable and what's a compromise. So the non-negotiable is like, we have to agree on a way forward. It might not be in this conversation, but it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Or the compromise is, I might not get what I want, but I'm open to hearing what they think is a good idea, and then we might change the ultimate outcome. But ultimately, what's always going to happen with reactive behavior is the less reactive you can be, the less reactive the situation will become. Because often people who want to become defensive, or they start to become aggressive, or even have some passive aggressive tendencies, is they're looking for the rise. They're baiting, right? Like, they want to see you get upset. They want to get something out of you. But if you can maintain that composure, it's going to reduce the likelihood of it spiraling out of control. And if you can't maintain that composure, just say, hey, I think, like, again, just use that tactic. Hey, I think we're getting off track. Let's pause and let's come back to this conversation tomorrow.
So good.
I just want to see, Sharon, I've had difficulty with people who have suffered from passive aggressive people in the past, can also misinterpret. Yes, exactly. This is where understanding people's, like, you're never dealing with this person in front of you, ever. You're never dealing with just Peter in this moment. You're dealing with all the years of Peter before this, right? You're dealing with all of the experiences that Peter has had before this. And so often this reaction we get in this moment, it's not necessarily because of you. It's not necessarily because of this conversation. The subconscious can only use past behavior to predict future behavior. right? It can only use past experiences to predict future experiences. So when you are saying something to me and I feel something, the subconscious immediately goes, when in my past have I also felt this emotion, and how am I going to react in this moment? And the subconscious is like, oh, that time in 2006, I felt similar to this. I'm going to react that way. And so sometimes you are not getting the response from a 30-year-old male or female, or, a 30-year-old person right here in front of you. You could be getting a reaction from a 12-year-old person.
Yeah.
And again, when we can be curious and have a generous assumption, it changes the way that we then connect with people in that moment. And this is where taking the time to build connections with people, getting to know people, understand what their challenges are, their pain points, their desires, how they like to process, how they like to think, how they like to interpret things, you're going to have better outcomes because you can adapt the way that you show up and have conversations with them to get better outcomes.
So good. Yeah.
Hopefully that's helpful.
You gave us all everything in our toolkit, to be honest. Everybody, now we must go regulate our emotions. No, but thank you so much, Tash. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today for the questions and answers. But as Tash mentioned, you can always contact her if there is any pressing questions that you had that you unfortunately didn't have the time to ask in this session. Also, she didn't really advertise herself that well, so I'm gonna do it for her. But Tash is a coach, a certified leadership coach. So if you personally feel like you want to take on some of her services, for you to help you as a leader, as a manager, please reach out to her and book in a time, even to have a conversation. But without further ado, I might have to say goodbye to Tash here. But everybody give her love on the chat. Tash, thank you again so much. That was so insightful and so helpful. Honestly, it was such a good session. I don't even work for a community venue. I'm gonna take that home with me to my kids, and to my spouse and stuff like that. So we're so grateful for everything that you've shared and your experience. And hopefully that can help all of us like moving forward and having all types of conversations with different types of people. So thank you once again.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Okay. Before everybody heads off, I just wanted to share with everyone that SpacetoCo does offer free, you heard that right, free resources. We're the Oprah of resources for community venue. You get a resource, you get a resource, you get a resource. But yes, we do have a lot of resources, from an array of all these previous webinars to case studies to guides, ebooks, tools, checklists. We will send this link out to you guys, along with Tasha's slides, any notes that she may have, her contact details, all in the post event email that you will be receiving, as well as the recording for this session if you wanted to watch it all over again, or if you honestly wanted to share it with somebody that you thought of while being in this session. You're like, man, this would have been so good for this person who's not watching it. Share it with people. Go for it. You be our extended Oprah hand to everybody else. But without further ado, we just wanted to close off this collab. Thank you once again for tuning in, everybody. We hope that you have an awesome day, and we will see you in the next one for October. But other than that, have a great day, everybody. Bye.